In my last LEGO video, I proposed the idea that the LEGO Incredibles was the most unnecessary LEGO game. Of course, I ended up not agreeing with that proposal and ended up liking it a lot. In the comments of that video, some people suggested LEGO Horizon was the most unnecessary LEGO game. My reaction to that was, there was a LEGO Horizon game, and it came out less than 2 years ago? LEGO Horizon Adventures. Here's the thing, some of my favorite LEGO sets are the ones that are based off IPs that aren't popular enough to get their own LEGO theme. Many of these sets being a part of the LEGO Ideas series. Sets such as the Natural History Museum, Seinfeld, and The Office are some of my personal favorites. Heck, LEGO could make a I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream set, and I'd probably think it's super cool. However, usually LEGO games are reserved for some of the more popular franchises. The only exception to that was the LEGO Incredibles, but even the Incredibles is recognizable by pretty much everyone. It just isn't in the same popularity sphere as something like Star Wars or Marvel. However, Horizon Zero Dawn isn't even as popular as the Incredibles. It's a series that only a portion of gamers are super familiar with, as the games are exclusive to PC and PlayStation. It also seemed like a weird choice to turn a game not meant for children into a kid's game. Building Legos is generally for all ages. I would never say something like the Eiffel Tower is a kid's toy, but LEGO games do generally appeal to younger audiences more. The game also didn't coincide with any release in the Horizon LEGO theme. The sets, I might add, look absolutely amazing, though these sets were geared more towards older LEGO builders, not kids, while the video game is geared towards children. So it seemed like the target audience was a very small set of fans of Horizon Zero Dawn who not only liked LEGO, but liked to play LEGO video games, since not all LEGO builders enjoy these games. I'm not saying this game shouldn't exist. If the game is fun, that's all that matters. But it seemed confusing that out of all the series to make a LEGO video game out of, especially of a video game franchise, Horizon Zero Dawn was the game to do it. Still, all that matters is the game is good, and not off to a great start. I usually take online reviews from strangers with a grain of salt, as should you. I'd say out of all the LEGO games I've played recently, this is probably the most divisive one, even more than the Skywalker Saga. I've seen people praise this game, saying that it's countless hours of fun, while others say that it's the worst LEGO game ever made. It's because of these mixed opinions that I have no clue what to expect when starting this game. Many of the negative reviews from what I saw focused on how it didn't play like other LEGO games. That's because it's not like any other LEGO game. For almost 20 years before Horizon Adventures, pretty much every LEGO game had been developed by Traveller's Tales. It was only really the last couple years where other companies were able to create LEGO games. I think since LEGO fans were so accustomed to the TT games for such a long time, when a LEGO game comes out that isn't explicitly a different genre, like LEGO Drive or LEGO Party, then fans expect a new game to play just like the others that came before it. However, LEGO Horizon Adventures is nothing like all those other LEGO games. That's because it was developed by Guerrilla Games, the people who made Horizon Zero Dawn. I have no issue with this gameplay change. It just made it so I had no expectations going into this game. Even with The Incredibles, I knew if it played like a regular LEGO game, I would still have fun, and I ended up enjoying it a lot. With this game, I knew it could go either way, but I still went into the game with high expectations, and immediately upon starting the game, I think one of the biggest improvements this game made is apparent. That is, just how good this game looks. It sort of surprised me just how good a LEGO video game could look, because before this, the games did look good, but I knew I was playing a LEGO video game. During loading screens, or during conversations when the characters were just standing still, I felt like I was looking at a real LEGO minifigure at times. Another cool aspect about the visuals is that everything here is LEGO, not just the characters and the Destructibles. For pretty much every LEGO game, only parts of the world were made of LEGO, such as the characters, vehicles, and breakable objects. The world itself was still just regular materials. For Horizon Adventures, literally everything here is LEGO, from the buildings, the ground, the fire, and even the water. It's a super cool thing that they didn't have to add. It proved to me that this game wasn't a quick and lazy cash grab. They could have just had LEGO characters in the regular world, because that's how every LEGO game worked beforehand and no one ever really complained, myself included. It wouldn't be a problem if they didn't choose to put all this effort into making a LEGO world, but Guerrilla Games did so anyways. So even before I really started to play this game, my expectations for it were really high. Another neat thing about this game is that the dialogue here is completely original to the game. Lately, I've been playing more of the recent LEGO games the past 10 years or so, the ones with voice acting, and I was actually surprised to see that a lot of the voice acting in some of these games are just ripped right from the movie. The LEGO Incredibles wasn't terrible with it, but The Force Awakens, almost every piece of dialogue during the cutscenes were straight from the films. It made the cutscenes feel weird and somewhat boring since it was just a rehash of the movie, but with LEGO characters. Here, the voice actors reprised their roles as these characters, and all the writing here for the dialogue is original, which is far better than just animating LEGO characters over voice lines from something else. The voice actors also do a great job here, putting a lot of character into their line delivery for these minifigures. The humor is alright. Personally, I think LEGO usually does a better job with physical comedy rather than dialogue. Since this game is mostly dialogue, there isn't all that much here that was super funny or memorable. Again, I'll say this anytime I mention the humor in a LEGO game. The comedy isn't targeted towards me. If I don't find it entertaining, then that's perfectly fine. No knock against the game. The only thing I care about is that I'm not annoyed, which for this game, I wasn't at any point. Conversations and cutscenes are brief, and there's nothing here that I would say was annoying. I will say, the one thing that did get a chuckle out of me was the animation for when you fell from a high ledge. As for the story itself, I never played the original Horizon Zero Dawn game, so I'm just going to go off what people say about this game online. The story here starts off pretty similar to how it does in the original game, in an abbreviated way that LEGO games like to do. The adventure starts with Aloy going to Mother's Heart to meet with Teersa to learn more about herself. The beginning of the game does pretty much spoil many of the earlier events of the game's story. I guess it was my fault for playing this one first, since the first game came out almost 10 years ago, but there was one moment where I stared at the screen after it happened and I was like, did I just get spoiled by a LEGO game? And yes, I did. If you're interested in playing Horizon Zero Dawn, I suggest you play that before playing the LEGO version. Luckily, only the early parts of the game get spoiled because as the game progresses, Horizon Adventures starts to develop its own story partway through, and then it becomes its own thing. Again, the story is fine. A game like this, it only needs to be something that pushes the game along, which it does here. Now with all that out of the way, it's time to bring up the biggest change that this game made, gameplay. Traveler's Tales LEGO games, the ones we were used to before this game, were more action-adventure games with a mix of puzzles and platforming that involved a simple building mechanic along with some basic beat-em-up combat. Some games did add different mechanics and change things up, but the core gameplay of the games usually stayed the same. Horizon Adventures instead changed things up by having a fixed isometric perspective that was much farther out. There's some platforming and a couple puzzles here and there, but the focus is more on the combat. Other LEGO games also have larger levels that often promote exploration for bonuses and the collectibles, either in the levels themselves or in the overworld. Horizon Adventures also ditched that for more linear levels. When I read many of the complaints about this game, not all, but a decent portion of people complain about how this game is just different from all the other LEGO games. Personally, I'll be honest, I think it's a little silly to complain about something not being what you expected it to be when the game is pretty clear on what it is. Looking at any trailer for a couple seconds would show you that this game doesn't play like any other LEGO game. On one hand, I don't blame people too much for complaining about this change, since almost every major LEGO game released 20 years prior to this one had the same core gameplay, but on the other hand, the game doesn't lie to the player. It's very clear with what it is from just watching the trailer. If you don't like the gameplay change, that's fine to have preferences, but if the main complaint that is that it's different, then that is a bit silly. I will say from the start, the gameplay changes are fun. Again, the focus here is on the combat rather than the other elements that are usually included in LEGO games. You only have one basic attack. For Aloy, it's her bow and arrow, but there are different ways you can attack enemies. You could shoot enemies straight up, but you can also shoot her arrows through fire to burn enemies, knock down pillars, throw and shoot bombs, or even throw enemies along with some other ways. There's actually a lot of different ways you can damage enemies in this game, and the game definitely encourages you to utilize the environment to find ways to beat your enemies. There's two enemy groups, minifigures who usually go down in a couple hits, nothing too special, and machines. The machines have a little more variety as each machine has its own set of attacks and weaknesses that the player needs to be aware of when fighting them. However, for many machines, shooting the weak spots won't be enough to kill them, so you'll have to use your environment to deal more damage in most cases. Along with Aloy, there's 3 other characters you'll unlock throughout the story, but the only thing that changes are the basic attacks. What characters you use ultimately come down to preference, such as if you want a character with a more direct quick attack, like Aloy, a melee character like Erend, or someone with slower projectiles that can hit a larger area, like Teersa. If you're only interested in beating the game, not 100%ing it, then you only need to focus on one character. There are 2 ways your characters will power up in the game. One is by playing as the character and leveling up, which upgrades specific characters with extra damage or health, while there is a skill tree for universal upgrades. You use studs for these upgrades. Studs in this game act a little differently than in the TT LEGO games. Studs are automatically collected when breaking objects or opening up chests, rather than lying on the floor and needing to be picked up. Plus, studs are what's used to purchase universal upgrades, as well as purchase cosmetics for your characters or for your town. Again, if you're focused on just beating the game, then studs will only be used for upgrades, not cosmetics. Early on in the game, I was actually enjoying the change in gameplay here, and pretty much everything else about the game. Yeah, I still preferred the gameplay of the TT a little bit more, but I was still enjoying myself with this game. Most levels follow a similar format, where there's a combat area, then some simple platforming where going off the linear path rewards you with studs, and then back to another combat area. All the levels connected through the hub, Mother's Heart. Like I mentioned, you can also use the studs to customize the town. I never really did this, as I'd prefer to save up my studs for upgrades rather than cosmetic changes. I like it when games have separate currencies for upgrades and cosmetics, something like Power Wash Simulator 2. If you're just trying to get through the main story, the town is only a way for you to get through each level and buy upgrades. You won't be spending too much time here. The only thing similar between levels in a chapter is the theme, as they are their own standalone things. 4 of the levels are pretty much the same, but with every area, there is one level that takes place in this technology-filled area called the Cauldron. These worked as the dungeons in the original game, and here, these levels are definitely the highlight of the game for me personally. These levels do have a combination of combat, basic platforming, and puzzles. There's nothing too crazy here, but it does break up the usual gameplay from the other levels. Along with these levels, there's also the bosses as well. These are just machines with larger health, less openings, and more ways of attacking you. With most other machines in the game, it really comes down to hitting the weak points and dodging their 1 or 2 attacks. All of them can be defeated in pretty much the same way. There are some enemies that do require a little more than just spamming attacks to beat them, such as the shell walkers in the late game. The bosses often have limited openings throughout the fight. You can still attack them at any point in the fight, but you won't be doing much damage. Plus, there's more attacks that come out quicker during these fights, so attacking at the wrong time can cause you to get hit. And getting hit by these guys can do a lot of damage. Usually 3 or 4 hits is all it takes for you to go down. And dying in this game actually means something. In the TT LEGO games, outside of a couple levels, if you died, you just respawn right where you died. The only thing you lost were an insignificant amount of studs. In newer LEGO games, you can turn off losing studs when you die, so there's literally no cost to dying. In Horizon Adventures, if you die in a combat area, you have to restart everything. That means enemies respawn and are back to full health. There are actual consequences to dying, which genuinely surprised me on my first playthrough. I couldn't believe it myself, but there were parts in boss fights I actually had some trouble with. These fights weren't hard. It was just to go from a regular LEGO game, which tends to be extremely easy and forgiving, to a game that is still pretty easy, but does require some focus. It was a bit of a shock and change for the first time. Again, not hard, but there are some fights here, especially the boss fights, that can put up a decent challenge. It's actually a nice change of pace from what I'm used to from LEGO games. By the time I beat the first world, I was genuinely surprised that people were hating on this game as much as they did. It seemed like it was overblown since a lot of people on forums appeared to love this game, and most of the negative reception, from what I initially saw, was more about how the game was different, not things the game did wrong. However, as I kept playing through the next 3 chapters, I realized something. The game never changes. Every single level is built the same exact way. Almost every single combat section plays the same, and even if the scenery of the level might change, it feels like you're playing the same level over and over and over again. And then it hit me. This game is super repetitive. I mentioned it before, but every non-Cauldron level plays the same, where it's a linear path with basic to no platforming, then a combat section, then back to more hallways, and more combat arenas. There's very little variation to the gameplay loop. After the first chapter, I was already getting tired of this game. Every level is pretty much the same. There might be different enemy types, but fighting most of the enemies pretty much requires the same strategy. That is, attack the weak spots, dodging the one enemy attack that requires jumping or moving out of a danger zone, and then firing away. Since the moveset is so limited, there really is no variations to beating these enemies, and the platforming sections are just, again, hallways where the rewards, quote unquote, for walking off the beaten path is just more studs. There's no collectibles, barely any puzzles, there's no buildables either, very little if any exploration at all. Usually when building is required, all you do is press a single button and it's built for you. The game really never changes that much after the first chapter. The Cauldrons are a nice change of pace, but even these levels feel the same between each other, with the platforming just being some slow moving platforms, and there being the switches you have to throw bombs at. It's enough of a change to make these levels some of the better ones in the game. The boss fights were pretty fun as well, but that's such a small portion of the game, and even the boss levels have these hallways leading up to them for the fights themselves. The game does try to add some things to try and change up the gameplay, with there being power-ups you can pick up throughout the levels. These can include a fire bow that burns enemies, and a tripwire that does massive damage to enemies that walk into it. These are cool. The only problem with them is that the abilities you get are completely random, and some abilities are better for some machines than others, so that removes an element of variability in how you play the levels. These abilities don't really change the way you play, other than there being one dash ability or one defense ability, or there being an extra attack you can can do. I think allowing players to choose what abilities they want before starting a level would have been cool. There are also times where you have an item that might not work well against certain enemies, such as having a tripwire against enemies that stay far away and shoot projectiles, so then you end up just using your basic attack for most of the fights. Still, even if you use the environments, such as shooting through fire or using your abilities, since some of these combat sections are very long and everything has a limited use, I found the end of a lot of the combat arenas just resulted in me spamming the basic attack and then running around to avoid attacks. The issue isn't that the combat is basic or bad, it's actually quite fun. The issue is that this basic combat is all there is to this game with no variability, so it gets old real quickly. In one of the first levels, I remember there was this puzzle where you had to shoot your bow through fire to burn down some vines. It was simple. I thought maybe this could lead to there being some interest in puzzles in the future, but there was nothing really like this. All the other puzzles like this to get chests often required a specific ability, like the fire bow to melt ice, to get the chest. There just isn't all that much here. Almost every single level plays out the same way. The TT LEGO games are as simple as you can get for a video game. Simple puzzle, simple combat, simple platforming, but in every game I've played, it changes things up so you're not always doing the same thing in every level. If every level in a LEGO game was just walk into a room, fight enemies, walk into another room, fight more enemies, then those games would have been boring as well. But there's a decent bit of variety to the levels in those games that makes them much more memorable than anything that is here. I'm not saying that LEGO Horizon had to play exactly like a TT game, but that it needed some kind of variety in the level design other than just being hallways and combat arenas with very little differences. Even the differences between the characters are so small that it doesn't really change how you take on the enemies. Online, it says the game is around 7 hours long. I beat it in under 5, which is less than pretty much most LEGO games. Also, considering that this game was listed at $60 when it came out, I can see why people were so peeved. I know most LEGO games release at $60, but even the shorter games come with a bunch of bonus content that usually doubles your playtime. In newer games, that bonus content was a lot different than what you were doing in the levels, so the full price felt somewhat more warranted, even if I wouldn't pay full price for a LEGO game. 100% in Horizon Adventures, it's just doing more of the same over and over again. One of the requirements for completion is to level up the characters to level 20. It's pretty much grinding, and I've seen many LEGO fans complain about how annoying it is to fully complete this game. If I'm already tired of this game by the 1 hour mark, and I don't think I'd look forward to doing more of it after beating the game. The game is $40 now, but even that seems like a steep price for this game. And that's pretty much it for Horizon Adventures. Out of all the LEGO games I've played recently, I gotta be honest, and I apologize to people who like this game, this is the LEGO game I think I've enjoyed the least. Would I go as far as to say it's the worst LEGO game? Probably not. You could probably find some random LEGO game out there that is objectively worse than this. Sure, if we're talking major LEGO releases though, from the ones I've played, and I haven't played every single one, but this one was the least enjoyable so far, which is a shame because it had a lot going for it, with the great presentation, amazing voice acting, and combat, which from a pure mechanical standpoint, I think I liked more than the TT games, but the game doesn't change or evolve. Pretty much every level is the same, it just has different enemies scattered in them, 90% of which can be defeated the same way. If you like this game, which I'm sure a lot of people do, then that's great. I could see this game being fun if you don't mind the repetitive nature of it. I liked it in the beginning myself, but this isn't a game I can play for more than an hour before realizing it wasn't for me. I think the weirdest thing about this game for me is what makes this game a LEGO game.
What?
Okay, I know that the characters are LEGO and that the world is LEGO and that the game says it's a LEGO game, but it doesn't feel like a LEGO game in a sense. I know I went on a whole rant before about people complaining that this game wasn't like other TT games, but what I'm saying here is that other than the aesthetic, there's nothing really about this game that really takes advantage of it being a LEGO game. Even other LEGO games that weren't made by TT still had elements that gave it a reason to be a LEGO game, usually something to do with building. Here, there's pretty much no building at all. At most, you press one button and then it's all done for you, and you're building the same few items. The other element that has been true in most LEGO games is just breaking a ton of stuff, which I'd say is something that's also true for real LEGOs as well. We've all broken or dropped our fair share of LEGOs. Again, in this game, there's a few sets of items that can be broken. It's more like a Zelda game where you can break boxes, pots, and grass to get rupees, rather than a LEGO game where most of the environment is breakable. This game could have ditched the LEGO branding and changed to a chibi art style, and nothing really would have changed. It's almost as if it used LEGO as a market ploy, and that's about it. I know that's not entirely true because this game doesn't come off as a lazy cash grab. There was a lot of effort put into it in some areas that made it clear that the developers did try to make a good game. That's why I don't want to emotionally bash this game for hours. It could have definitely done more to make the game feel more enjoyable. Is it the worst LEGO game? Again, there's probably worse out there, but out of the ones I've played, I had the least fun with this one, and by a pretty big margin. I wouldn't be against if Guerrilla Games wanted to try a sequel to this game. The foundation and the core mechanics mechanics are fun, it's just the gameplay loop around those mechanics that makes this game repetitive. If they could fix those issues, I could see a sequel for this game working. Anyways, that's it for this video. See you all next time.